Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hello, I'm Kathy Jen with the Levy Senior Center Foundation. We're happy to welcome both our in-person and remote audiences to today's Levy lecture, Meet Irena Sendler, with presenter Paddy Lynn. Throughout her elementary and high school days, Paddy Lynn was active in plays and fascinated with theater in general. She attended college in Illinois State University, or at Illinois State University, where she received a bachelor's degree in theater. After finishing college, Paddy Lynn joined a theater group in Evanston, Illinois, and helped form a children's theater company that went into schools in the Chicago Metropolitan area. She had such a wonderful time sharing a variety of programs with the students that she decided to return to the schools after taking a hiatus to have her second daughter. When she returned, she worked as a substitute teacher and a teacher's aide in the elementary schools. Unbeknownst to her, she was honing her skills as a storyteller at that time without being fully aware that she would soon launch her into a solo career as a storyteller. We're thrilled to have Paddy with us today to present this lecture. This program is made possible by the Levy Senior Center Foundation and the City of Evanston. As always, we appreciate your support of the foundation as we continue to work to connect our community of older adults. As a reminder, please silence your cell phones and reserve all your questions until the end of the presentation. At that time, if you have a question, we will ask that you raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you so that our remote audience and everyone in the room can hear your question. I'd like to now turn things over to Paddy Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Irena Sendler. I was born Irena Sendler on February 15, 1910, in Warsaw, Poland. My parents were Dr. Stanislaw Szyżanowska, and my mother's name was Janina. Both of them were members of the Polish Socialist Party. My father, he was a doctor of infectious diseases, and he believed that everyone should have access to health care, whether they could pay for it or not. In 1916, there was an epidemic of typhoid fever in Warsaw. Of course, the poor people were hit by far the hardest. But my father, he continued to treat everyone, regardless of how sick they were. In early 1917, my father himself, he got the typhus. My mother, you know, she did not want me to go in to see him. But when she realized it might be the last time that I had the opportunity to talk to him, she allowed me to go into the room. And I will never forget seeing him laying there on the bed. He said to me, "Irena, I have to tell you something. If someone is drowning, you must lend them a hand." I remember he said this to me because I say to him, "But Papa, I don't know how to swim." And he said, "Irena, it does not matter. You have to do something." That would be the last time I would see my father. But you know, those words stayed with me for the rest of my life. My father did not have any savings, and my mother, she did not have a job. And although many people in the community wanted to help us, my mother was too proud to take their money. So eventually we had to move out of Warsaw, and we moved to Piotrków, where my mother, she did find work. It was a busy city, a little south of Warsaw, and the streets were always filled with talk about Polish politics. For centuries, Poland fought for its independence from aggressive neighbors in both directions, Russia to the east, Germany to the west. And Poland had the largest population of Jews in all of Europe, with over 3.4 million Jews. And it was also the center of Jewish culture. The Jews were a diverse group who immigrated from all over the continent. Some were poor, some were rich, and some were in between. But by the 1920s and the 1930s, people with strong feelings against the Jews, they came into power in Poland. And then Germany took away the Jewish rights for freedom, and they made anti-Semitism the law of the land. I saw the injustice from the time I was just a child. You see, most of my own friends were Jewish. I learned how to speak Polish at the same time I learned Yiddish. It was no surprise to me that I would follow in my parents' footsteps and I would become an activist. In 1928, I entered the University of Warsaw, where I studied Polish culture. I wanted to study the law, but I was told that was just for men, and I should probably be a school teacher. I had no desire to become a school teacher, but I did study Polish culture. At the age of 21, I married my high school sweetheart. His name was Irena Sendler. He went to the university with me and he studied the classics and he became a professor. Unfortunately, Irena did not tell me at that time he wanted me to stay home, be his wife and have the children, take care of them, you know. I could not do this. I knew I had a calling. And unfortunately, Irena and I, we separated early on. I went back to school and I enrolled in the social welfare program at the University of Warsaw. It was the early 1930s and the Soviets had been beaten back from our borders, and this was only the second time in history. In the social welfare program, we were encouraged to what they said have experience in the field. So I had heard about a professor by the name of Helen Radlinska. She was born Jewish, but she had converted to Catholicism. Upon meeting her, we instantly connected. It turned out she had worked with my father before, and she had a sweet spot for me. With the help of Dr. Radlinska, I got a regular paying job in the office of the Mother and Children branches of the Citizen Social Aid Committee that provided support for the unwed mothers. One of my jobs was to help educate women on sex and the prevention of teen pregnancy. I knew I had a calling to help many people at that time. I wondered how would it be that I could become a mother when I saw so many families struggling with their own children. Irena and I, we remained friends, but he moved on to Posen, and he taught the classics there, actually, and I moved into my mother's apartment in Warsaw. On the morning of September 1, 1939, my mother and I were awakened by the wailing sounds of the air raid sirens. We grabbed our bathrobes and our slippers and we ran to look out the window. And we saw all these people pouring out of their apartments, rushing into the street, and everybody is looking up. Streets were empty, no cars, no traffic for that matter, but the people, until the air raid wardens, they shooed everyone back into the building. And those sirens continued to wail. I turned on the Polish radio and we listened to the announcer speak the words that we hoped we would never hear. Hitler's attack on Poland had begun. And then another announcement came directly after that. It said, all government and city workers, they need to stay at their posts around the clock, using all efforts to resist the German aggressors. See, Germany was rolling into our country from the south, from the north and the west. Well, I couldn't just sit there. I had to do something. So by 7 a.m., I got dressed, I jumped on my bicycle, and I pedaled off to my office, which was on Zlota Street. At that point, I was working as senior administrator in the branch of the city social welfare offices. We actually ran the soup kitchens across the city. So once I arrived, I found my supervisor. Her name was Erika Schultz. And we immediately began to set our plans in motion on how it was that we were going to be able to help all those poor families survive the crisis. Certainly all the families I had serviced up to this point were going to need our help more than ever. Around 9 a.m. that morning, we heard the sounds of, the only way I can explain it is shrill, ear-piercing sirens. Maybe during a storm. And then the thunder from the planes over our heads, and that is when the first bombs fell. Of course, we all ran into the bomb cellar for shelter, all clutching hands in the dark and praying that our Polish defensive artillery were fighting back. Then once the squadrons had passed over, we came out of the cellars, and in all of my 29 years of life, I never saw anything like that. Streets were filled with broken glass and fallen bricks. Flames engulfed all the buildings. Dust filled the air, stinging our eyes and our throats. It was just complete devastation. And that was when fear gripped Warsaw. We began to wonder, if this is what the city looked like, what did our front lines look like, where our army was trying so hard to fight back? But we didn't have time to really ponder this. We had to get to work quickly. We needed to find the food, the shelter, all the things that those people would need, those people who had been bombed out of their homes. The fighting continued in Warsaw for the entire month. And then on September 24, more than 1,000 German aircraft filled the skies and bombed the entire districts into rubble. Of course, some of the worst hit were the Jewish sections, destroying so many of their cemeteries and their synagogues. And now Warsaw was without food, it was without water, it was without electricity. So on September 27, Warsaw surrendered. 40,000 people died in the bombings. 70,000 men died on the front lines. 630,000 people became prisoners of war. And my metek, he was one of those. You know, I kept hearing my father's voice in my head. I heard him say, Irena, the Polish people are drowning, yes, but the Jewish people have it far worse. At that time, we had no idea about the plans that were being made for total extermination of the Jews. Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Gestapo, a man, if you can believe it, even Hitler called him heartless. He sent instructions to the Polish commander saying, I once again draw your attention to the final solution. And that is when the wheels of the Holocaust were set into motion. My mentor, Dr. Radlinska, she had to go underground herself to be safe. Thankfully, the sisters at the Ursuline convent and gave her shelter, and she got a new name. Her name was now Pani Rudnicki. Dr. Radlinska and the other professors, they were forming a secret Polish university. You see, at this time, we already had a secret army and a secret government and even resistance newspapers. It was wonderful we were going to have a secret university, but the question I had was, what about social services? Nothing was being done to help these people. The Jews now were banned from receiving state welfare, and they were forbidden to work. So many people now were starving, they were destitute. So I found Dr. Radlinska, and I spoke to her about building a mirror social welfare system. This would enable us in our own little cell to discreetly work with all the other cells, work together. Question now was, who was willing to help me with this project? I reached out to my supervisor at social welfare, Irka Schultz. She was also a friend of Dr. Alinska. And another person I trusted was Jadwiga Denica. She was a teacher who trained under Dr. Korzek, who ran the Jewish orphanage in Warsaw for 30 years. And the third woman I asked was Jaga Piotrowska, my co-worker. Jaga was very trustworthy, and she had a sister named Janka who would also be willing to help us. One evening in my apartment, we sat around drinking wine and smoking cigarettes, and we came up with our plan. We made a pact to defy the Nazis' anti-Jewish directives by making some simple changes to the paperwork that we carried with us. It was very simple, but it was highly effective. You see, before the war, my job was to visit all the poor families and to determine who needed the help the most. And then, of course, we would be distributing the food and the clothing and money to those peoples in those poorest communities. So now we simply had to forge documents and compile lists of non-Jewish names to give to the Jews who needed the food and the money and the clothing that we would be passing out at our centers. Then, to discourage the Germans from checking up on our fictitious families, we added notations about deadly diseases like typhoid and cholera. The Germans were terrified of contracting diseases. So they left the job of sanitation up to what they called the dispensable ones, the Polish people. Oh, the first year we had our challenges, we did, but we managed to provide thousands of Jews help. The second year was a little bit harder. You see, by autumn of 1940, the Germans had much more control of Warsaw. Now they closed the synagogues and issued the curfews and forbade the Jews to ride on the trains or even use a telephone. Eventually, all Jews over the age of 12 had to wear the blue and white badge, the Star of David, for identification. At that time, I reconnected with a childhood friend of mine, Adam Selniker. He was Jewish, and I was so fond of him. He had to wear the Star of David, so I decided I would wear the star as well, even though my papers all said I was Christian. You see, anti-Semitic thugs roamed the streets, and they found interracial dating to be easy targets for beating. By 1941, young Polish boys were being paid by the Germans to beat up anybody who was wearing the Star of David. And you know, it was so heartbreaking to see so many people see what was happening, see the injustice, but they do nothing because they do not want to be involved. By spring of 1941, word was out that the Germans now were making plans for the Jewish quarter across the river to isolate them. You see, typhus was spreading much quicker now. And the Germans decided that the Jews needed their own quarter, the Warsaw Ghetto. The ghetto consisted of 73 streets. This was 4% of the streets that were in Warsaw. And they were by far the most heavily destroyed from the bombings in the poorest rundown cities. The Jews were given 2 weeks to relocate. This mandate affected 250,000 residents, Jewish and Polish. At this time, the Germans, they controlled the Jewish council, used to be the Judenrat, which made sure that the Jews would comply with all of the German orders. Needless to say, the Judenrat faced many difficult dilemmas and situations. But you know, my heart went out to the 30% of the population, some 400,000 people who were now going to be crammed into 3% of the streets in Warsaw. I watched throngs of people moving their belongings, handcarts, and baby carriages, small children dragging suitcases, and young mothers struggling to carry the bedding and the linen. Yet you know what was really strange to me was my Jewish friends thought this was going to be safer for them. They thought that they were going to be getting away from the Nazis and maybe some of their anti-Semitic Polish neighbors. But my intuition told me different. No. The ghetto is a trap. Terrible danger was lying ahead, and I simply had to figure out how much more I could do to help these people. The ghetto penned in people on all sides. Because the Jews were accused of spreading disease, they were walled off from the rest of the world like animals unfit for human society. And there would be soldiers standing at every gate. Nobody was going to be allowed in or out. There were 22 openings in the wall itself, and at each opening there stood a German officer, a Polish policeman, he was called a blue, and a Jewish ghetto police officer, all guarding. And everybody had to carry a ration card. These German IDs, they were called Kennkarta. And why did they need it? Because the Jews got 10% of a normal diet, 184 calories per day. Now, at first, the children were used to smuggle in some food and money and such. But when the Germans realized that the children were doing this, they made the Jews build the wall higher using their own money, and they would make sure that they put the barbed wire up there and broken glass so nobody would escape. As you can imagine, the streets of the ghetto were filled with starving people, beggars, begging for bread. Cold, disease, and hunger. It turned the ghetto into a cemetery for the living. At first, I tried to get into the ghetto using my own fictitious job in the sanitation department. But I was bombarded with questions all the time, even though, as I said, my Kennkarta, my ID, showed that I was Christian. Now, it wasn't until my own friend, Dr. Majkowski, he authorized me a pass to be on his list of medical corps workers. And he issued me an epidemic control pass, and also one to Urka and Jadwiga as well. Now we were wearing nurses' uniforms, and we made little holes in our undergarments where we could place vaccinations for typhus or money or whatever might be needed. My code name now is Yolanta, and only my friends knew me by that name. Our little cell of workers, mostly women, we did pretty well until we needed to expand our network. Now, many of the Jewish children who managed to escape the Aryan side were captured, and they were returned to the ghetto. Now the average number of people in a room went from about 6 to about 20. As you could well imagine, sanitation and hygiene were horrible. You know, up to this point, my little corps of workers, we were just smuggling in the food and the money and the clothing. But now we decided we were on a mission to save the children. The question was, could we fake documents to create a Polish identity for some of the Jewish children so they could escape the ghetto? We had to try, even though we knew that the risk was certain death. And in order to succeed, we had to have more people help us. Question was, who could we trust? My friend Yaga, she insisted that we solicit the help of a man by the name of Jan Dobraczynski. He was senior administrator of the Warsaw welfare program. Now, Jan, he was a Polish Catholic, and he was loyal to Poland. But he was also a member of the ultra-nationalist right-wing party. And this was the party that was responsible in the first place for segregating the Jews. I had many run-ins with this party, and I did not know if I could trust Jan. But I trusted my friend Yaga, and Yaga trusted Jan. Then I find out that Jan had access to all the names of the impoverished children. Streets now were filled with the orphan children. Even Jan was ordered to delouse the orphans and get them off the streets once and for all. And if he didn't do it fast enough, then the Nazis would handle the situation. So our team went to work immediately. Children flooded in each and every day. We swept them up from the streets and we put them into trucks. We cut their hair, washed their bodies with lye soap, dressed them all in clean clothes, and had them checked out by a doctor. Then we tried to relocate them to the orphanages with Jan's seal of approval. We were especially worried about the boys. Circumcision was unmistakable proof of Jewish blood. And so many of them were Jewish. But you know, too many children were dying in the streets. We had to find ways to smuggle them out. We got creative on how to do this. We fit the babies into briefcases and abandoned bags. Sometimes we hid them in toolboxes or small wooden boxes, or sometimes under coats or clothing. We even went so far as to put them on top of the dead bodies in the coffins to take them out. Toddlers and older children we often took through the streets at night, through the tunnels and the basements and through the city sewers. Now remember, everybody had to carry a Kenkarta. And these identity cards had their serial numbers, fingerprints, the child's name, address, and a photograph. All these documents were required for identification. So now we begin to work with the orphanages. We asked them not to report the death of a Christian child. Instead, we would use that information to create a new identity for a Jewish child. And then we would find that child a safe place to live. If a church burned down, we would ask for all the blank identification certificates, birth certificates. Now I started making lists of each child's name, first name, last name, and address. I placed this information on tiny little pieces of paper, little white pieces of paper, and I place them inside a bottle that I bury under an apple tree in my yard. Only Yaga and I knew where that bottle was buried. Now, with our epidemic control passes, we could easily take out a Jewish child out of the ghetto to a sanatorium in Atwak. If the child's cough did not turn out to be tuberculosis, that child would disappear into one of the homes of either our friends or somebody that someone knew in the village. Yes, every single person was aware of the risk. But thankfully, so many Aryan people took that risk. Polish children never worried me, especially the ones with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. But the children with Semitic features, they worried me the most. So what did we do? We taught them how to speak Polish and recite catechism. By mid-1942, our network grew to more than 24, which included the welfare office and the Polish underground and the Jewish community. And then things got a bit tense because we find out that the Gestapo are on the hunt. Now rumors are spreading that the Nazis have a plan to kill thousands of Jews. You see, at this point, we thought that the Jews were only being relocated, maybe to labor camps or somewhere in East Poland. Nobody wanted to believe the rumors, but as those rumors increased, so many more people wanted to ensure safety for their children, as you can well imagine. So once again, I reach out to Jan Dobrociński. He has so many contacts with the orphanages across Poland. Jan kept his promise to me and made arrangements with the facilities to take in the children. My biggest worry now was, were those children going to be able to find their own families when the war was over? And then in July in 1942, we got word that all the Jews living in Warsaw were going to be deported to the east. And the only ones that would be exempt would be the ones working in German factories or hospitals or worked for the police, or maybe they were just too old to be moved or too ill. 10,000 Jews per day were loaded up on the trains at Umschlagplatz, and they were being transported to the gas chambers at Treblinka. By mid-August 1942, 190,000 people had died. One of my worst memories was seeing Dr. Korshak, the doctor who ran the local orphanage. He walked with his entire group of children to the boxcar, and then he boarded the train. The Nazis say, "No, not you, you go, you are free." He say, "No, I am riding this train with my children." He refused to save his own life because he wanted to die along with his children. That day, I used every ounce of energy I had in my body. I walked back to my mother's apartment, and I had a nervous breakdown. My mother called the doctor. Things had gotten so bad that people were willing to walk to the train instead of starving to death. We had to do more. My colleagues and I, we began knocking on all the doors of the people who remained there, asking them, begging them to trust us to ensure that their children would be safe. We promised them all Catholic identities, and the baptism records would provide the necessary records they would need. And we also continued promising to keep that list of names, birth dates, along with the new current name, address, and whatever else they needed so that the children could be reunited, hopefully with their parents after the war. We knew people did not have money to help us with our efforts, but we found creative ways to get money from the Social Welfare Office to help with our expenses. We did the best we could until our coffers began to dwindle. And honestly, I didn't know what else we could do. And then one day, a colleague of mine whispered something in my ear. She said, "Zegota." And she hands me an address on a little piece of paper. I was so desperate that 2 days later, I went entirely by myself. I knock on a door. I have no idea who is inside. When I am asked what the password is, I say what is on the little white page of the paper. I say, "Trojan." And the door opened. The room was very dark, very dimly lit. A man stepped out from the corner of the room. And in very low tones, he began to explain to me a secret network called Zegota. Formerly, this was the Council for Jewish Relief. It was formed by two women, a Catholic nationalist and a Catholic socialist, who both condemned the genocide of the Jews and came to their aid. You see, Zegota apparently had connections to the Polish underground. He explained to me how the funding came from agents in London who dropped money by parachute into Poland. He asked me there on the spot, "Does your network want to join my network?" I shook his hand. It was a lifesaver. Now, with the money we got from Zegota, we could pay stipends to the orphanages and the foster families, and we could expand our operations. The core of my network remained the same, but now I was able to recruit dozens of couriers and operatives. We even hired the medical professionals to help at the various hideouts with long-term and short-term care. And all of this money, which sometimes was the equivalency of about $750,000, to pay for these expenses. All this money came from either the Jewish or the Polish government in exile, or from Britain, or from the Jewish American community. By January 1943, I counted, we had 1,000 names of rescued children. And then we thought maybe we could help some of the adults. I rented 2 buildings, one in Atwak, one in Sveider, and trains connected those villages. Under the guise of a city social worker, I brought in the doctors, the money, and forged identity papers. And we were able to establish 9 safe houses across the city to aid the Jewish people who broke out of the ghetto. And then I was informed that the Gestapo was now after me. Of course, I had to be much more careful about whom I could trust. On May 16, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto was burned down. The great synagogue crumbling, a haunting symbol of the annihilation of the Jews. And they estimated that out of 60,000 Jews there, about 56,000 were killed. In October 1943, on the feast day of Saint Irena, my namesake, I had a small party in my apartment. My auntie, she come to stay with my mother. And after the other girls leave, Yanka and I, we stay up till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And before going to bed, I placed my list of those names on my bedside table under the window. And then I placed a bag of identity papers that held all the money and those things near my bed. And Yanka and I, we fall asleep. Shortly thereafter, I wake up from loud banging on the door. Gestapo, Gestapo, open up. I don't know what to do. I have the list of names in my hand. I toss them over to Yanka. Hide it, I say. She stuffed it in her bra. The door shatters open and the Gestapo storm in, screaming orders in my face. I do not respond. I am stoic. But I do count them. There are 11 of them. They tear up the furniture, rip up the floorboards, throw the dishes out of the cupboards, rip open my mattress, which caused it, the bed frame, to fall on the bag that had all the identity papers in it. And they do not find it. But they were relentless. Then they began to question my sick mother and my auntie. And I say, oh, no, no, no. These are people from out of town. They are innocent. You just need me, I tell them. So they yell at me to get dressed and go down to the van that is waiting to take me to Alei HaShuha, Gestapo headquarters. Of course, I knew that they were going to kill me. Very few people ever came out of Alei HaShuha or the Paviak prison. But I was far too worried about the names. Imagine all those people I promised, all those parents I promised they were going to be reunited with their children. I had to remain calm. I had to trust that my own friend Yanka, she would do what I asked her to do. And I kept telling myself that as long as the children and my own mother survived, then I would suffer anything in silence. Once we arrived at Alei HaShuha, also known as the slaughterhouse, I was taken into a room where a seemingly gentle man started to question me, speaking perfect Polish. I answer all his questions until he asked me what organization I work for, and then I remained silent. He picked up a file from his desk. He tells me he knows all the leaders of Zegota and the underground post office box at the laundry, where I used to send out my information. But I play dumb and I say, oh, no, no, no. I do not know what you're talking about. You have the wrong person. I am a social worker. He nods his head. Very well. Very well, Paddy Sendler, he say, we will talk again. And then a guard pushed me down the hall to a cell with other prisoners. He screams in my face, sit down, no speaking. So I sit there motionless. I look down at the floor, it's covered in blood. And it shrieks and moans come from below and up above me. But I stay silent. And then one day I am called to the medical clinic. I recognize a woman who calls my name. We were students together under Dr. Radlinska. She tells me I need to go to the prison dentist. So when I arrive, I recognize the dentist as well, Dr. Anna Sipowicz, another acquaintance of mine during the activist days. Anna starts to explain to me how she's going to drill a small hole in the back of one of my teeth, and she's going to place a message in there for me. And she asked me, do you have a message for Zegota? Yes, I say, I do. Tell them that the lists are safe. Oh, I knew Zegota needed the information, otherwise they would be frantic. When I return to my own cell, I take out the piece of paper in my tooth and I read, we are doing everything to get you out of this hell. But the beatings and the torture continued. By January, they broke my legs and my feet using leather whips interwoven with steel wire. And the only reason they did not kill me was because they did not know who I really was. To them, I was just some stupid Polish woman in the resistance. If they knew who I really was, no, it would have been far worse. They forced me to work in the prison laundry room, standing long hours on my broken feet. And I had to clean the feces off the Nazi underwear. And then the day came, the day I thought would be my execution. January 20, 1944. You know, my initial reaction was relief. No more torture. I was one of 20 women marched down to a truck in the prison yard. And then we were driven to the firing squad at Shuha. As each woman's name was called out, she would be led through the door on the left, and then you would hear the gunfire. It was my turn. I hear my name, I go to the door on the left. And a guard, he signaled to me to go to the door on the right. So I go to the door on the right. And a Gestapo officer in tall black boots, he say, come with me. And he leads me to the corner of Alei HaShuha, and he says, go. You are free. I do not know what to say. I am in shock. And then it dawns on me, if I am free, I need my papers. My Kenkarta, I say, I need my Kenkarta. He say, you stupid thug, punch me in the mouth. He said, you just go, you stupid. And I go. I walk on my broken feet. I walk to the closest store I can find. It was a drugstore, and a kind lady take me in the back room, and she cleaned me up. And then she gave me some clothes to put on over my prison uniform and some money to buy a tram ticket. My instinct, of course, is to go home, to see my mother. I didn't tell you, but my mother has a terrible heart condition, and I was so concerned that she would be worried about me, of course. So I got on the tram, but I was only on there for a short time before someone got on the tram, and he tell us all, you have to leave because they're checking papers at the next stop. So I get off the tram and I hobble on my broken legs and feet, and I walk to my mother's house, and I am out for 2 days. And when I wake up, I see how bad my mother is. All that worry and anxiety. I cannot live with her. I would have to be putting her in danger that way. So I asked Zegota, they arrange for new identity papers for me, and I go into hiding. And you know, I always thought how ironic it was. I had that list of names of all those children, but now that list, it saved my own life. Zagota knew if I died, the only trace of the children's Jewish families would die along with me. In the winter of 1944, Yanka and I went into Yaga's backyard on Lekarska Street, and we buried that list of children's names we had into a soda bottle under the apple tree. Another one. The Germans continued to hunt for me. I dyed my hair red and assumed my name, Klara Dobrowska. And I also went to my friend Maria Pallister for help. She was the woman who had so many connections with high-ranking officers. She found an agent that would pay $100,000, which was the highest ransom ever paid, to report that I too was executed. So now I start running my operation from Maria Pallister's home. Of course, I had to stay under the radar of the Germans. Many more of my friends in Zagota, they were being captured. And you know, I did go to see my mother one last time. But she made me promise not to come to her funeral. And it was a good thing I did, because my friends that went to the funeral said the Gestapo were there waiting for me. By spring, the Soviet army was approaching Warsaw to crack down on our Polish resistance army. War was inevitable. Yanka and I dug up the soda bottle under the tree, and we packed them into 2 glass soda bottles under the same tree. But when Warsaw exploded into street warfare on August 1, 1944, now that list had 2,500 names on it. By August 5, the Germans had the upper hand and troops rampaged our city. Stark orders were to kill every inhabitant of Warsaw, down to the smallest child. Within 2 weeks, 65,000 residents were executed in the streets. Those who survived gathered all the food or water, clothes, whatever they needed, and retreated to the city's basements to hide. The Germans wanted, no, this is good. The Germans wanted complete annihilation of the Jews. But our Polish artillery fought valiantly back. You can imagine everyone was desperate to stay alive. We ourselves bribed a German guard who pointed us in the direction of an abandoned airfield in Okasi, where we found some empty barracks we could hide in. And several of my own friends, the Pallisters, my friend Adam Selniker, and a little girl named Anna, we walked south, leaving Warsaw, watching it burning behind us. By October 1, it was all over. Warsaw emptied all of its 1 million inhabitants, and the Germans systematically burned down house after house, churches, schools, hospitals, government and commercial buildings, the museums, libraries, and even the Polish National Archive. The final death toll was 200,000 people. Another 150,000 Poles went into slave labor camps in Germany, and 55,000 died in the concentration camps that winter. Overall, 6 million people died, and that included 90% of Poland's Jewish population. At the start of the war, I mentioned there were 3.4 million Jews in Poland, and out of that, I would say about 11,000 survived. After the war, Yanka and I met in Yaga's backyard, but all of the trees were gone, and the yard was just a tangle of twisted brush and metal. We wore our sturdy boots and took our shovels and tried to find those 2 bottles that had the names on them. We spent hours searching, but we never found the bottles. Like everything else in Warsaw, it was lost forever. But Janka and I, we were determined to recreate the list from our shared memories as best we could. We found Jaga's old typewriter in the ruins, and we began to plunk out names. And then in 1945, a colleague of mine, Dr. Berman, who was in charge of Zagota, head of Central Committee for the Jews in Poland, he took that list of names to Israel, where it is today in a sealed archive to respect the privacy of those thousands of families. Jaga and Jan Dobraczynski also made their very own lists of names of children who passed through Catholic orphanages. And Jan maintained that the children could decide their own faith after the war was over. For decades, I tried to reunite as many of the children with their families. But the truth is, most of those parents were never found. I want to emphatically stress that those of us who rescued children, we are not heroes. That actually irritates me to think people would say that. The opposite is true. I continue to have so many qualms about how little I was able to do and how much more I wish I could have done. Perhaps you are wondering why you never heard a story like this before. Well, after the war was over, Poland fell from Nazi occupation to Soviet domination. And of course, they had to hush it up for years. People who fought for Polish freedom in World War II were considered to be enemies of the communist state. So you can understand why such a story needed to be buried, except for maybe a small circle of collaborators and survivors. It was just far too dangerous to speak openly about it. Today in the United States, many infants and toddlers our network managed to save, of course, grew up. In the 60s, they would have been in their 20s. Nowadays, 90s, or maybe older. Some of them I had the pleasure to meet before I passed away in May of 2008. I was 98 years old. It was truly an honor to be named to the list of Righteous Among Nations at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Organization in Israel. They planted an olive tree on the Mount of Remembrance for me, and they honored many of my co-workers too. Remember, I never did this by myself. We were about 20 to 25 people strong, mostly women, and think about all those other people that risk their lives daily to help people. No, I am not a hero. I simply like to think of myself as one member of a vast collective effort of decency. And that is how I hope you will remember me. Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you so much. So some questions maybe I could answer for you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She didn't write the book. She didn't write a book, but there are books about her. Yeah, these 2 books. I see you have Life in a Jar. Wonderful book. This is a really interesting book. This book is actually divided into 2 sections. The first section is about some teenage girls in Kansas City who had a teacher, a social studies teacher, I believe, who had a project every year, and that was you had to find somebody in history that you wanted to do a little project on. And that project could be anything. It could be a play, it could be a poem, it could be, you know, a mural. You could do anything you wanted to. And there were 3 girls, I believe 2 of them were freshmen and 1 was a junior, who went in his office closet where there was a box, and they started rummaging through the box, and they found this woman named Irena Sendler. And they asked their teacher, "Would you know her?" And he said, "No." And nothing? No, that's what you need to do. You need to work on her and put something together. So they made a little play, and there were just 3 of them. And one of them probably played Irena, and the other 2 had played a variety of characters. And they did that for their class, so they could introduce Irena Sendler. And the class loved it, and they did it for the school, and the school loved it, and they continued to do it for like neighboring schools and different places until after they graduated, they were still doing it, and they went to Warsaw, and they met Irena Sendler. And it's just such a fascinating story. And her section of the book, Life in a Jar, is the other half of it where I got most of my information so that I could put together what I thought was a cohesive portrayal of a woman that, to me, is unbelievable. Irena's Children is written by this woman, Tyler J. Mazzio, and this book not only comes in for adults, this one's the adult book, but she also made it for children too. So there's a children's, more child-friendly version of it as well. And this one is an interesting book as well. I probably didn't get as much information out of this one as I did the first one. I got some of my photos, though, my pictures that I like. But I think that you'll, you know, you could certainly glean from some of these books a lot more than what I was able to share with you today about a woman that risked her life each and every day and still did not want to be called a hero, which I think is wonderful. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to use a microphone.
Do you do other presentations?
I do.
Can you name some?
Yeah, sure. I do, let's see, I do Emily Dickinson. I do Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. I do Beatrix Potter. I do, with my husband, I do Love Letters. With my husband, I do excerpts from Spoon River Anthology. And the one that I compiled that is in the very new, early stages, because I've been doing Irena now for a couple of years, and I wanted a little levity. We're doing the Burns and Allen presentation. Yeah. Libraries, I go to libraries, I go to, you know, cultural centers. I don't get as many school jobs as I used to. I do kids programs in the schools, but that's for little kids and stuff, not these kinds of programs. Book clubs, women's groups, pardon? The Irish Center, oh yeah, I've been there before. Yeah, you probably saw me either do Emily or Beatrix Potter, because that's what they always want. They always want. I do, it's my name. It's PADDYLYNN, so PaddyLynn.com. And I have a website, and I have a wonderful web lady who wants to not be my web lady anymore because she wants to change careers. So I'm not really good with websites, so I'm gonna have to find somebody too that will take it up. Technical things are not my thing, you know, yeah, not my thing. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
You talked about the nervous breakdown that she had. How was that treated? Do you know any more about that? Did it take her out of circulation for a while? And how was that diagnosed?
Yeah, she had a nervous, she did. She had a nervous breakdown. And from what I gathered, she was out of commission for a while, but she was such a fighter that it wasn't for very long. You know, I think that she immediately, like within a week or so, probably came back. Yeah. She just, you know, she would put her, it would be like mind over matter, you know? That's what it always, whenever I'm reading things about her, it's like she would just keep going because she knew that she had to save these kids. I mean, she was dedicated to that, to these kids. Yeah.
And how could she not have had a nervous breakdown?
Oh, that's the question. How could she not have had a nervous? Of course. How could she continue to do the things she did and then be in harm's way, knowing that people were out looking for her? I mean, obviously, the woman from the laundromat where she used to give out her information probably was, you know, held at gunpoint, and she definitely probably turned her in. And then how did she manage to live through some of these things? I don't know. It's amazing.
I have no question. However, I would like to make a statement.
Okay.
First of all, I want to congratulate you, what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I was the witness there during the time in Warsaw. As a child, I was born 1929. I was there in 1939 when the bombs were falling in the sea. And so I know, to supplement to, I'm going to speak at Loyola University, my version as a survivor of this thing.
That's wonderful.
I had a different story, but I had said story to tell. I never spoke about like this in my life, but somebody heard about me and suggested I should be speaking
You should
about
be.
this thing. I'm trying to get all the information for this thing. And here I have a copy of the university that
You'll be speaking?
I'm going to speak there. I'll be the same thing as you.
Yeah.
I hope I learned something here so I can.
You lived it. You lived
That's
it.
the first time I'm doing in my life.
That's good.
I'm a professor of business, not this type of business.
But you're sharing your story. And this is what I say all the time when I go to places. I always say, my great-grandparents immigrated from Poland. And yet we never talked about any of this kind of stuff. And my own grandparents didn't talk about this kind of stuff. And I want to know why we don't talk about it. Don't we think that having conversations about these things will help us to be better in the future, like maybe hoping to prevent anything like this from ever happening again? I mean, I think we just need to talk about it. So bless you for talking about it. Thank you for sharing that with us.
By the way, I was in the ghetto visiting during that time. I was there 2 or 3 times going in and out. And because my mother had a tailor that was in Poland, you couldn't buy things, you had to go to tailor.
Yeah.
He was Jewish and he was there doing that. So I was kind of smuggling material, things, and bringing something there.
Good. Oh my. Oh my. Oh, my heart goes out to you. Oh, this is another book. Yes. This one is Bringing Life to Children of the Holocaust. This one kind of reminds me a little bit about that movie that they had made and it was on public television. There's a movie about Irena Sendler. And this one kind of reminds me of that. This one is Susan Brophy Down is the name on this one. And there's a lot of good pictures in this one as well. And interesting things. I'm sure I took several pieces out of this as well. So yeah, these are the 3 primarily that I used. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? And yeah. Oh yeah, you need a mic.
One of your slides showed Auschwitz, but she was never there. She was imprisoned in Warsaw. Is that correct?
Yeah. She was at the Pawiak prison.
Yeah. Because I've seen both. I mean,
Yeah.
anyhow.
It's hard to get slides you can use, so had to, yeah. Anybody else? And yeah.
Are these books in the Holocaust
I don't know. Well, the question is, are they in the Holocaust Museum? You know, I was there as just, you know, to go through the facility, and we never got into the bookstore, and yeah, I know, I wish we did, but I hope that they maybe have them, yeah. And I wondered if the Holocaust Museum might be interested in this story too. But,
They have so many different.
yeah, but I don't know anybody there, so. Yeah, good.
Which is amazing.
That's good.
No, I do know some people there.
You do?
I was a docent there. So
Okay.
yes, they would love to have you, but probably wait until they move back into their facility.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. And I always tell people, you know, and like, oh, well, if they say, I wish that, you know, you come to my library, you know, it helps people like myself who do these kinds of programs. The librarians, by the way, like to hear from you, what you want, not from a bunch of actors saying, you need to hire me. You can imagine how tough that is? Because like, you know, really? Yeah. You know, so if you think that I fit somewhere, please share my name, or I have a card, whatever, if you want to.
Community college, because I've been going to lecture and they ask you to pick, well, what you suggest now I have to kind of rewrite that and say, what about, because they did have this lady, her father is a lecturer in history, and she was portraying, I can't remember, she was a maid on a boat, on a ship that sunk.
Oh, on the Titanic?
Well,
Was she?
there were three ships, 2 out of 3 sunk, but she survived.
Oh,
And she was this maid for, you know,
Maid.
she wasn't really maid, she was actually a higher up, and she served rich people.
Oh.
And so she dressed, and that was like amazing.
that's interesting. Yeah. If you do want to come up, and I'm here if you want to come and speak to me. And if you want a card, I hope I brought my cards. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm just gonna,
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it.
sorry. I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed today's program. You can check out our YouTube channel, Levy Senior Center Foundation, or give our website a visit for a link to this and past programs. Okay, and then a recording of this lecture will be made available to watch on the YouTube channel sometime this month, and we'll send everybody an email with a link. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.